In 1998, Valve released a computer game that did not just raise the bar. It kicked it off the rails, ran it over with a tram, and left the other FPS games at the time scrambling to catch up. This is Half-Life. And this is why, over nearly 3 decades later, it still hits harder than most shooters today do. Or does it? Recently, I played through the original Half-Life from 1998 for the very first time, and oh boy was it a roller coaster. I can definitely say there was no other game I have played up until now that had me, at so many points in time, annoyed the crap out of me and also amazed me. The game is kind of like Schrödinger's cat in a way. At times I hated it with every part of my being, and at times I loved it more than anything else. But it was always one of these extremes and never a mix of both. I found not only this, but also the game itself quite interesting. I'm sort of a nerd and, well, into old games, so I thought it'd be interesting to do a sort of retrospective and collect my thoughts about the game in a video. So that's what we'll be doing today. First up, some background info. I'm not too big on story-driven shooters nowadays. I have played games like Crysis and some campaigns of the newer Battlefield or Call of Duty games, but I was never really fond of them. I always felt that they were way too scripted and really just restricting me in what I can and can't do. And always taking away my player control and making me watch these pointless cutscenes to drive their trivial plot forward. As well as the fact that these games usually take a long time until you're properly in the action, and always having the need to teach you the most mundane mechanics over a big time span. Due to this, I never really ended up playing these games much anymore. That was until I decided to buy Half-Life 2 on a whim, and it all changed. There was no long tutorial or exposition scene. Instead, I was right there in the action. The game practically checked everything on my list: intuitive action gameplay, an exciting story that's not aggressively shoved down your throat, and a pure, desolate and melancholic atmosphere. And well, after finishing Half-Life 2 and its respective DLC, I told myself I absolutely had to play the predecessor. And so I did, about a year later. Once I got my hands on the game, I just straight up didn't play it for like another 4 months. Until then, I eventually remembered that I had it and played it. It took me about 12 hours to finish this game across 5 sessions, and I basically got through it in like a week. And it was really addicting, let's just say that. So I'm guessing it's probably gonna be more productive to just go through the game chronologically first and then get into its guts. So let's do that. We start out with quite a long train ride whilst we're getting exposed to an introduction of sorts. We learn that we play as Gordon Freeman, a scientist at the Black Mesa Research Facility out in New Mexico who's on his way to work. And this train ride does really go on for a while, until eventually we're let out by none other than Barney. Now his line about the beer from Half-Life 2 finally makes sense. After some security checks, we're inside and head toward our locker to collect the HEV suit, the heart of the game. It basically serves as armor, but also grants you some other perks along the way. We then properly check into work and are tasked with testing on some hazardous material. And of course, as luck would have it, we end up opening portals to other fucking alien worlds and have effectively started an apocalypse. Now alien races from all over are streaming into our world and causing mayhem. Once we wake up, we head out and are informed by the science team that they're open to helping us. We then collect a crowbar, another essential item for accessing vents and the like, and head out. We're supposed to go topside, and to do so we head through the office complex, meeting the first zombies and turrets, whilst also solving a few puzzles along the way. Eventually we catch wind of the fact that the Marines have arrived, and this is honestly a pretty cool turning point, as despite the common belief amongst the science team, they're not here to help us. Instead they're trying to cover up and contain the whole facility. Now we finally get to fight human enemies as well. Moving on, to exit we need to access the silo. Sadly for us, there's a giant tentacle monster residing in this thing, and I was stuck here for a long time. This puzzle/boss fight is really interesting as you need to power up the engine and are supposed to figure that out. However, and we will get to this more later, these tentacles kill you in like one hit, and I honestly felt lucky rather than skillful whenever I moved past them. After burning these tentacles to a crisp, we face off against another boss. This time this giant mech-type alien. This one also took me a while, but eventually we flee on a rail cart. We solve a few puzzles here and there, fight more, and then reach a turning point in the game. We're caught by the Marines and thrown into the garbage processor. After fleeing, we're basically starting out from nothing again, having lost all of our weapons, but now we're also outside on the surface. We kind of wander around a bit, traverse a few minefields, fight some more Marines, and eventually face off against what feels like the whole army. Tanks, snipers, Marines and turrets, you name it. At least we kill another big alien with an airstrike, as we're informed that the military is pulling out of the Black Mesa facility. Now we have reached the Lambda core and reactivate the reactor inside. We do some portal puzzles and then eventually head into the big portal to reach Zen, the last area of the game. This alien border world serves more as a parkour at times, but it's more of what we're used to by now, just in a different environment and with different physics. At long last we face the final boss, this big alien baby thing, and blow its brains to Kingdom Come, to then be informed by the G-Man that he's hired us, and we leave off in the same train that Half-Life 2 starts in, at least spiritually. And that's about the whole game in a nutshell. Now let's go over some of the more important things to point out here. First off, the movement, which takes a while to get used to. You'll mostly be going quite fast throughout the game, because the base movement keys are actually the sprint keys. And if you press shift, then you can move more at a walking-like pace. Jumps are a little weird, however, and from my experience you can do the basic thing that exists in about every game I played, where you just crouch mid-jump to go further or higher. The game also has an actual long jump mechanic, where if you crouch and then jump while running, you do a more horizontal jump. Kind of like Mario. Speaking of jumps, while jumping you can't really change the direction you're going in, unless you're in the low gravity zone. Again, we'll talk about that a bit later. But that about sums up the movement. It's pretty rudimentary, but it gets the job done for this game, and once you're familiar with it, it works well enough. Important to the core gameplay of any shooter is also, well, the shooting aspect. Aiming is actually quite smooth, however, except for the crossbow you'll be simply hip firing, as is usual for Valve games. Overall, the shooting is surprisingly fun for a game this old. The impact on the enemies feels really good and rewarding, and the heavier weapons have a good amount of oomph to them to make them feel powerful. As for weapon spray, I'm unsure if it's actually a thing in this game, and it's not as concise as it should be. Most of the time you can just hold fire without any repercussions, and I guess that's fine. Magazine sizes are also good enough to where the guns don't feel endless, but also don't die on you too soon. You can reload on your own terms, and the reload animations are also quite fitting for the gameplay, taking not too long and are not too short. As for weapons, the game has a bunch of them, the most iconic being the crowbar you obtain once shit starts hitting the fan at the research facility. You use these to open vents, break boxes, even in a last resort type situation, or to conserve ammo as a melee weapon. Then you get your pistol, revolver, SMG, alien, minigun, rocket launcher and crossbow and what else. As well as a few special weapons which you get from the aliens themselves, like a cannon that shoots out tiny headcrabs. Alternatively, you also got grenades and mines, which I never really ended up using. Overall, the variety and distribution of weapons is good, however the focus lies heavily on the SMG and the crowbar to get around the game. Most other weapons are just not reliable enough in the fast-paced combat. I also sort of like that they preferred the crossbow over a typical sniper rifle, and it even works differently as you fire arrows instead of bullets, which have an actual weight and fall off over distance. The general game mechanics are somewhat stable, but also really annoying at times. Basically, you have a health and a power bar, which you can both refill at these wall panels, or by just finding some health or battery kits lying around. The power bar acts as a general armor bar. However, I have found most enemies to be incredibly strong and the Freeman to be a man made out of literal cardboard, despite the fancy suit. He can die incredibly quickly, especially when it comes to explosions. They do not play around with explosions in this game, and if you're too close to them, you will die. This makes the incredibly annoying minefield sections even more annoying and hard to get through. The Freeman can also swim, but don't expect him to be able to hold his breath for long. But off the top of my head, I can only really recall 2 sections in the game in which you actually swim anyway. Additionally, there are multiple hazards in the game, such as radiation or poison, but there's not much to say about them. All of them behave practically the same, as in they make you take damage procedurally over a span of time. It's really basic and was again quite annoying at times. Now, having the core gameplay done, another interesting and core aspect of any game, at least to me, is the atmosphere. Does it feel like a video game, or does it feel like an actual living, breathing world you're taking a part in? Does it even try to achieve that? Well, Half-Life definitely does. I think that the hardware limitations actually made Half-Life better, since you have to remember that, first of all, we're out in the desert in New Mexico in the middle of nowhere, and second of all, we literally triggered an alien apocalypse about a few hours ago. These 2 points lead to the lonely and solemn atmosphere in Half-Life. Outside the facility, there's barely anyone friendly, and a lot of times you'll be left all alone in the world, wandering about hearing nothing but your own footsteps. In addition to the atmosphere, Half-Life also features a handmade soundtrack. Although rarely played, the tracks that do play are iconic in their own right. Like the title, Hazardous Environments, that went on to be the main theme for Valve intros. It plays right as you emerge out of this crate into the canyon side, right as a fighter jet flies by. This moment is incredible, and the soundtrack undermines it. Have a listen. Now, visuals are usually one of the less important things in games. As long as the game is fun and it has a fitting art style, I don't care if it doesn't have the ultra-realistic quantum computer ray tracing system graphics. Half-Life is old, and for the time, it tried its best to be as realistic as possible. Basically, every texture you see in-game is a downscaled version from a real image, which really adds to the atmosphere of it all, especially inside the research facility. The characters also look pretty good for the time, and especially facial animations are incredibly impressive for this time. It's 1998 and these guys are moving their mouths and faces. Crazy. You can also see far enough for combat and general landscapes, so the view distance is not a problem. Even the skyboxes, especially on the outside canyon sections, are incredibly well done for the time and are extremely atmospheric. I always adore these, especially in old games, and although rare since you're mostly inside, these are well done and I always liked seeing them. Overall, the visuals are quite nice and good enough, as well as hold up pretty well. The enemies in this game also look well, but they also serve a good purpose. There's a pretty big variety of alien and human enemies, and most of them, especially the marines, are actually quite smart. They try to flank you, and their chatter changes up on whether they have detected you or not, which you can use to your advantage. They also set up ambushes and get you in less than ideal situations. However, I have found most of the soldiers to be way too accurate and deadly. Whenever they see you, they will hit you and hurt you faster than you can react. In combination with the weapons and gunplay, it actually feels good enough in every gunfight. Alien or human felt action-packed and exciting since you do die so easily, which adds a lot of tension. There are also a handful of boss fights in the game, most notably the final boss, but we'll get to him later on when we talk about the alien world. The first one you are likely to encounter are these tentacles inside the missile cell, which I have mentioned before. They are incredibly annoying to deal with. I found that by chucking grenades into their little hidey hole, they go down a bit, but they still one-shot you and are incredibly unpredictable. To defeat them, you have to activate the pumps in order to start a test fire in the engine of the rocket, Fallout 4 style. Another boss fight is this robot whom you simply drive away from monorail. But of course you need to activate it before in multiple steps, similarly to the missile earlier. This one plays more like a chase type boss, as you can't really defend yourself and rather run away and hide while fulfilling the objectives. I'm a bit unsure if you can count these as a boss, but a few times you'll also be going up against tanks. These can be incredibly powerful, but I never struggled much with them as I found it quite easy to blow them up using the rocket launcher. Now of course all these mechanics only really get to show themselves with good level design, which Half-Life has sometimes but not always. Most of the combat sections are pretty well done and offer nice and exciting environments to fight through. Most of the levels or chapters are gimmick based, meaning most of them revolve around a peculiar mechanic or aspect. Like this chapter where you'll be driving on a rail for the entire duration. I have found the pacing in this game to be fine, but some chapters are incredibly slow, like the aforementioned rail chapter or the office chapter for that matter. Now about the story. It's tight and easily understandable, but has enough twists in it to keep it exciting. The fact that the military show up on its own and you have different goals throughout the game make it feel like an actual battle. I mean, first you're simply trying to get by and escape to the surface, then you launch the Lambda missile, and then it's all about getting into the alien world itself and putting a stop to it once and for all. But I also just gotta note the fact that the Freeman doesn't actually talk. Yep, he just stays silent throughout the entire game. And honestly, that's totally fine. He doesn't have to talk. I actually prefer it this way. Instead of shoving a specific personality or voice down your throat, you can kind of roleplay the Freeman however you like. Maybe in your mind he is a father who lost everything and plunged the world into chaos, and is now quietly seeking redemption in the ashes of the world. Or he is just a mute badass who walks around the apocalypse delivering justice. Or maybe someone entirely else. The open interpretation is yours to make with Gordon Freeman, and that's totally fine. Like that's awesome. I would wish more games would do that. Speaking of story and pacing, the grand culmination of the game is the final area called Zen, which is the alien world. It is entirely low gravity and allows you to jump insanely high and far. Of course, the only enemies here are the actual alien races, and that's about it. It's really short in comparison to the rest of the game, and the only part of it that's stuck with me is this weird Vortigern cave which you have to climb up, and only because I died a bunch. This was probably the part of the game I died in the most. You would expect this section to be longer since it's literally like the final battle, but I guess it's cool enough that we have these sections at all. After making your way through Zen, you hit the last chapter of the game. That chapter including the final boss, Nihilant, who is this weird giant floating alien who looks like a baby. My thoughts are honestly kind of split about Nihilant. On one end, I really like the fact that there is a thing like a final boss in this game. On the other end, however, I despise the implementation. Basically, the whole boss boils down to destroying the green crystals, and then him shooting at you with wild attacks you mostly can't dodge intuitively, making you hide behind the rocks, and then you basically blast him with whatever you've got. If you happen to run out of ammo, you'll have to wait for him to attack you with this green orb that teleports you to a subsection filled with enemies but also ammo. Eventually, his brain will just open up, and then you can use this random bounce pad to launch Freeman all the way up and then jump over his brain and drop explosives in there. This whole fight is not only really janky at times, but also extremely hard to figure out. In older games, most of the time it's hard to figure out either because it makes total sense and we're just used to newer games handing it to us in an easier way, like with the tentacle fight earlier, or it makes no sense at all. Of course you'll try to shoot at him first, but it needs a lot of bullets to get his head to pop open, so you likely won't see it for a while and think he's immune to bullets. This is what happened to me actually, and I thought the subsections you get teleported to serve as more of a purpose than just refilling ammo. Eventually I had to look up a guide on it, and then Eventually I had to look up a guide on it, and then whoops, I had to find out that it's actually as mundane as just shooting at him. After killing the final boss, you are greeted by the G-Men, whom you may have spotted earlier in the game delivering the very material you tested within a chamber, leading to the resonance cascade. He basically informs you that you've done well and makes you accept a deal in which he will call you again if you are ever needed. Now, I'm not actually too knowledgeable when it comes to the Half-Life lore. However, I always figured that this all with the G-Men and the Freeman takes place somewhere out of time. Since it's been about 2 decades since the events of Half-Life 1, once Half-Life 2 starts.
Hey guys, it's John Marston here from the hit video game GTA with horses. To explain what this dumbass is trying to say since he's too illiterate. Basically, in the universe of Half-Life, the G-Man is a mythical and mysterious person whose motives are entirely unknown. While he appears as a middle-aged man in a suit, he seems to be able to bend time, space, and reality itself. People have speculated that the G-Man is a metaphor for the player or the developer, but personally, I don't believe any of this speculative dumb bullshit. Basically, he is an overseer of sorts from sources unknown and gives the Freeman the offer of a lifetime. Take a job or die, which the Freeman is forced to do. Anyway, this was John Marston explaining the G-Man and his time-bending abilities in Half-Life.
This could possibly be a groundbreaker if you didn't know about it, since besides the aliens, the game was actually pretty light on the fantasy aspect. But then in the end you have something where you're just chilling somewhere out of time. But I actually do really like the ending of the game. It not only sets up Half-Life 2 and everything that came after it, and is still to come afterwards, but it also leaves open a big unanswered mystery. Who is this G-Man? Why did he choose Freeman? And why trigger an alien invasion? Well, maybe we'll get answers to these questions sometime in the future. Been about 20 years now, how about making a new game? Just saying. Despite public belief, and after a bit of research, I found out that the game actually did have its own multiplayer mode back in 1998 on launch. Of course, back then multiplayer was quite different, and as far as I'm concerned, there were not really any notable custom maps, but it did exist. After dialing into the internet via the phone number, yeah, I know, unthinkable nowadays, and booting up Half-Life, you could play online, and this function is actually still a part of the game. Naturally, I asked my producer if she wanted to hop on Half-Life and play the multiplayer for a bit. And let me tell you, did we have her alone this time. Of course, the multiplayer servers almost 30 years later are no match and by no means no way to judge the game appropriately, but I still peeked in briefly into the almost entirely deserted servers. The online in Half-Life felt very bare bones. I just kinda spawned in a map, which I believe to be a custom. Unsure if this is by by Valve or by a user. And collected some weapons and killed some other Freemans who were just kinda roaming around. However, it lagged pretty hard and that made it practically unplayable. But at least we got a nice crowbar fight in. I don't firmly believe the multiplayer was a focus in the game's development, but it does exist, and it existed back then, and that alone is a cool feature. So it's definitely a plus for people who enjoyed it back then, but it did not revolutionize the online game space or incept it or whatever. Overall, Half-Life might not have aged as well, but the only things it really suffers from are minor and were present even back in the day on launch in 1998. Half-Life shaped the action game space like no other before it. It set new standards for all games to come and birthed one of the most infamous game series ever. I mean, just think about all the games that sprung from the original Half-Life. We got Half-Life 2 in its entirety, of course, the Half-Life DLC, which I may or may not cover in the future. We got Counter-Strike, Garry's Mod, and the one game similar to Garry's Mod for Half-Life 2, whose name I can't recall right now. I'm sure someone will know in the comments. So, is it still a masterpiece? Definitely. And I recommend everyone interested in the history of video games, or into retro games, or someone who's just bored, to go and try it out. If you don't fancy the old controls, you can also get Half-Life mod on Steam, which is basically a modern overhaul that is easy to install with one click. I didn't replay the whole game with it, but I could tell that it's a lot easier to play this way. Enjoy! Well, that's the end of the video. I had a lot of fun making this, and I really hope you enjoyed this look into the past and that I got to entertain, maybe even educate some of you on the history of this game. If so, consider subscribing or liking. It would mean the world to me. I know this is like only one of my first videos, but I sincerely hope I got to entertain some of you. I've got a few more videos in the works right now, so yeah. Until then, have an incredible day or night, and thank you so much for watching. Farewell.